everybody. This is Craig from the Pacific War Channel. This is politically incorrect history. We don't do these ones often. I'm joined here by my co-host Garv. How are you?
Hey Greg, great to be on here and ready for today's chaos, I guess.
Yeah. So for those who are regular listeners but aren't used to this format, we don't have a script. We don't have notes. We don't plan ahead. This is just an episode where we kind of decided on maybe some subject matter where we're going to talk shit and be a bit crude and crass and off the cuff. And before we were actually talking for about 5 minutes before we started the recording that we thought a good subject would be like talking about like the dumbest moments in military history, dumbest commanders, dumbest military operations, stuff like that. But before we jump into it, I implore you to join us on YouTube because we're going to be frantically trying to show pictures of whatever we decide we're talking about at the spur of the moment and make this more of a visual experience. And of course, if you'd like to join, and I have to admit, our booming YouTube membership and Patreon account, I've had a lot of members in the past month. You can check us out at www.patreon.com/Pacific War Channel, or obviously on the YouTube channel Pacific War for the membership. Either they're exactly the same. You join, you get access to the exclusive podcast series. It's 30 episodes and ongoing at this point. You get early access to all the content I make, which there's 4 or 5 episodes I think that are on there right now that are in early access, and you get voting rights to the subjects I'll tackle next. Stating all of that, I'll leave the floor to you, Garv. I think you have some things you wanted to talk about.
I think let's start with my favorite thing of Romans in pre-Scipio Africanus. Beyond brute force, they had absolutely no tactical sense ever. They just had discipline and brute strength because reconnaissance, archery, good amounts of cavalry, that's for pussies, right?
Yeah, you don't need that.
And it was so common that they would be blundering into situations. So sometimes it did force them to actually have major rethinks. And I think one great example of that is actually the Battle of the Caudine Forks.
I'm not familiar with this one.
All right, so it's actually a pretty old battle. So let me just start with a quick context map. So, right before the Romans managed to dominate Italy, you had these various confederations. You had the Romans and the Latin allies, as you can see in the red. You had the Etruscans, who used to be the overlords, the Umbrians, then the barbaric Gauls, and more importantly, the Samnites. Yellow are just the Greeks, right? So they're not really
Oh,
important
okay, I
here.
understand. I know this time period. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, what do people love to do in history? Fight each other.
Of course.
I mean, it's your neighborhood backyard brawl, right?
Except for the Greeks.
And oh, they fight way too much.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, of course. They're the ones who fight the most amongst each other. The only people they love more than killing like barbarians is, their own fellow Greeks these days.
I think they like killing each other more. I don't know, considering the fact they never united even during the Greco-Persian Wars fully.
Yeah, exactly. Existential threat? No, let's just go after Thebes.
Yeah. So towards the end of the 4th century BC, Rome and the Samnites are in a war. So the Samnites are like this confederation of tribes. They stay, as you can see, right, in the south central part of Italy. So it's a pretty mountainous area. I think, Greg, when you covered the Italian campaign of World War II, I think you're familiar with the geography.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah. So anyways, it's not a great place for the phalanx because this is the time the Romans actually use the phalanx still. But reconnaissance is for idiots. And they literally get a note or like, a deserter by the Samnites saying that they said, oh, yeah, they are here. You can just go through this valley, right? And just, march through and, take them by surprise, which is a proper trap. And lo and behold, what happens is you can see in this valley, the Romans are just stuck in the middle of the valley. The Samnites have erected fortifications at the front and back. And while it's not shown on this image, because I was trying to look for a bigger size image, they were also lining the hilltop. So you completely box them in. Now, this is where also I've got to talk about Samnite stupidity. Gaius Ignatus, the commander who masterminded this deception and success, bro's like, what do I do? He doesn't know what to do with this entire trapped Roman army. Right, this is a full consular army. So about 25,000 men. And he literally asks his father to just ride down. So while his father comes, traveling on horseback, the Romans are just sitting in this area for like 4 or 5 days. His
Yeah.
well, it's not like they have a choice, right? Because the main routes out are fortified, like wooden palisades and all. Siege weapons don't really exist for the Romans right now. It's not going to come to like what 100 BC onwards. So yeah, it's pretty. They don't really have a choice. And the father's like, okay, guys, Ignatius, here's your choice: freedom, and let them go with their dignity. You earn friendship, or kill them all, so that you weaken the enemy so badly that you can maintain the initiative. Guess what is the option that was taken?
Tell me.
One, a middle ground option of Ignatius. This is an artistic depiction. Is he just had them? He spared them. He did not kill them. But as you can see here, towards this part of the image, they all the Romans, right, from the consul to the basic soldier, had to walk under a yoke of spears, which is basically like shaming the hell out of them. That's it. Disarm them, make them walk home in shame. That was it. And yeah, that really did not work because that's how the Manipular Legion actually was formed in the next 5 years. The robots were like, let's just redesign the way. But yeah, they still did not learn the lesson of recon. They would blunder into so many more battles later on, especially with the Celts, especially with Hannibal and
Yeah,
Hamilcar
but
Barca.
Rome's greatest strength is just never giving up. Like that's all. They just never give
It's
up.
actually commendable though. You got to say that, right? I keep saying this. During the Second Punic War, especially in the aftermath of Cannae, the fact that they held together, it's immensely impressive.
Yeah,
What?
that would have been like of any point in history where you would assume Rome would just give in. It was then.
Yeah, and look, just consider it. Southern Italy has defected. Northern Italy has defected. Only like the central part of Italy, the old Latin tribes are loyal to you. You lost 25% of your manpower killed in the previous 3 years. You just have like what, a couple of cities and villages in Hispania under the Scipio brothers. That is Scipio's Africanus' dad and uncle. You Sardinia, Corsica, Sicily, including Syracuse, are rebelling. Illyrian pirates are like, oh yeah, the Romans are too busy. They don't have manpower. Let's be pirates. And Philip of Macedon has decided that okay, well, they're down. Might as well kick them while they're down. Oh, and may I also add that the Carthaginian navy was also raiding the Italian coast.
Mm-hmm.
And what do the Romans do?
Who
They
stayed
decide,
loyal? Well, Egypt.
uh, well, they did not really have influence into the Eastern Mediterranean, so nothing. Because the Second Punic War, Rome was still an Italian power with the islands of Sicily, Corsica, and
Of course, yeah.
Sardinia, and very little influence in Spain, Hispania.
No, but I know that they might not have influence in Egypt, but the grain from Egypt is what's feeding Rome, right?
But right now it would have just been simple trade because it's
Yeah,
still
but
under
just
the
cutting
Ptolemaic
off
dynasty.
trade, that's like
Yeah, it would have,
would
but
it
I
would
don't
have
think the
ended them.
population was as big. So,
Okay.
and if I'm not mistaken, the grain dole, right, which was very important, that was anyways not going to happen for like 100 years or so.
Yeah. All right.
And yeah, but the Romans just rallied, like literally, like anyone who just even suggested peace was just going to be executed by the Senate. And in just literally days after Cannae, they raised 40,000 soldiers to defend the city. And maybe a few months after Cannae, they had about 12 legions of their own, not even counting the allied legions, which would be an equal number of soldiers in the field. So approximately what? One legion's 10,000 men if you include the allied soldiers. And so in 5 months, they had like fielding 120,000 guys across theaters.
Yeah. I mean, Rome really did luck out that Hannibal was at war with the Carthaginian Senate. that
True
really is
enough.
what saved Rome. Like having no logistical support at all, even though you've got them by the balls, it's pretty sad to see. Like,
Yeah, but I don't believe even if he. I know there's always the question that exists, right? What if he marched on Rome in the aftermath of Cannae? would he have been able to take the city?
They would
Impossible.
have moved. Like the Senate,
He,
it wouldn't matter.
yeah, people have to remember before the start of the Punic War with Rome, he had a much larger army of over 90,000 in Hispania. He took a good part of it, right? Over 65,000 of them to besiege the city of Saguntum, which was the trigger point of the Second Punic War. And that siege took 8 months. His only tactics was counter-sallying and assaults and starving them out. And as you mentioned, right, no support from the Carthaginians.
Especially
He
when it came
has,
to the Navy. Like,
yeah,
they could have done more. Well,
true.
anything, actually.
But he had only 45,000 soldiers, right? He did also take losses.
Yeah, of course.
45,000 for a city the size of Rome, that's impossible. If your only tactic is to starve them out.
He couldn't even plunder and leave.
Yeah.
Logistically, it would be impossible. He really was put in an impossible spot. In many ways,
The,
when he broke into Italy, I guess you could think Hannibal was a bit of an idiot.
yeah, he should have just gone as a literally like a grand raiding expedition.
I mean, foresight is everything now, but what did he expect in the end?
I think he did really genuinely expect a mass uprising, and
To
perhaps he was
ride,
expecting also the Italian states that he liberated would be on equal quality of the Romans.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there was something to that, but to get them all to join in on killing, their fellow city states and like attacking Rome or putting it under a siege for what, 5 years? God knows how long now. It's not going to happen.
They're not Greeks, so yeah,
Like, are you
probably
going to
they
steal?
do.
It's like, are you going to steal from them to pay them? It doesn't really work like that. You're not bringing anything of value that they want. You're raiding
True.
their places. What, you're gonna be? Oh, take these people from this town. Let's go raid the next town over together. Like, it's not gonna work out.
Yeah. But I still think we know what is the greatest blunder or greatest, I don't know if blunder or military triumph is the best. The war on Neptune.
It's so stupid. Yeah,
That's I think I'll just make an honorable mention, by the way. As the audience can guess, we are just completely rambling on different tangents as it goes.
yeah.
Completely
I'm
unscripted.
I'm
No,
already thinking about like my stuff's gonna be closer to World War One. But yeah, carry on.
yeah. The Battle of Pydna, destruction of the Macedonian kingdom for good, literally started the battle because of a bloody donkey. That's
Yeah.
it. The battle that had like what 90,000 guys on both sides started just because of a fucking ass. It's one of the most ridiculous reasons I know of for a battle to have commenced.
I
So for
mean,
the audience, just the benefit is the armies were camped on either side of the Pydna River. The
here,
Romans
let me
more on
find a
a kind
map.
of, yeah, sure. If you're getting up one, or should I?
Yeah, I'll get one up.
All right. So this is the Third Macedonian War. So Macedonia had kind of a lukewarm relationship with Rome after their defeat in the Second Macedonian War. Now they have an anti-Roman king in question. Greg, the image is pretty side to the left. One sec.
Oh, here, you grab one.
Trying to find.
Apologies to
Problem is
audio
just
listeners as we're like searching on our Google Chrome tabs for images to show as we just mindlessly go into these subjects.
yeah.
Although I have to admit,
Apologies.
the last time we did this, I got a lot of comments. A lot of people just enjoyed the fact that there was no direction. It was just two guys speaking. That proof that we know some things. We don't have to read off of a
And we're not
teleprompter, as
AI.
one guy said. Oh, yeah.
Oh, all right. So I think this is just a simple example.
Yeah.
Sorry for the quality of the image, but wanted so you can see there's a river. The Macedonians are deployed on one side, the Romans on the other. The Romans on the kind of hilly area because, well, phalanxes are pretty good on plains, but not in hills. And so one of the things that Craig and I really love is logistics about war. Logistics involves getting water as well. So one pack mule literally just bolted from the Roman camp handlers and just went to the river. Probably wanted a drink. And it was at that time, those camp handlers, as they came, they saw the Macedonian camp followers trying to take that same ass. And you can just imagine, right? That just started the entire brawl. They start summoning reinforcements, and they're like, all right, that's it, guys. We're ready for war. And yeah, the war that ended up destroying the Macedonian kingdom for good.
What a way to go out.
Yeah, it's, I still say, one of the most ridiculous reasons to start a battle, because we know these guys, generals, love to have that dance, right? Of trying to get the psychological edge or some tactical advantage. So, yeah, I think, Craig, maybe we could talk a little bit about some other great blunders of history in the military sense. Or do you want to get to our favorite of
What's our favorite?
a certain naval expedition?
Yeah, you know what? Because chronologically, it's before the stuff that I want to talk about. So yeah, we can
But
go with that.
it doesn't matter, actually. It's your choice.
So where do you want to start with it? So what we're talking about is what is the official term? The second. It's actually technically the second and third Pacific fleets. There
The voyage of the
technically was
doomed.
to assemble.
Voyage of death,
So yeah,
or whatever
after,
you want to call
yeah.
it.
During the Russo-Japanese War, to do a brutal summary of the entire thing, the Japanese performed, for you Americans, a Pearl Harbor on the Russians at Port Arthur. Didn't take out their fleet, unfortunately, the way they wanted to. They end up kind of sieging a fleet. So the fleet was at anchor. They kept trying to attack it, but they couldn't get close enough because of coastal batteries and mines. They jerk around for months and months and months. Then they finally get two decent sea battles. And basically they destroy what was the Pacific fleet of the Russians. So
I
already
think
losing on land.
the first Pacific Fleet, right? Like the actual station Pacific Fleet. If I'm not mistaken, they lost their will to fight, you could say, with the death of Admiral Makarov.
Oh yeah,
When
no,
he
that
went
was a
over,
huge morale collapse.
yeah,
Yeah.
that I think destroyed the morale completely.
If you don't mind, actually, could you pull up a map of the great journey of the second and third fleet? It's I know there's one on Wikipedia for sure. So
Yeah, sure.
the Russians, instead of tossing the towel because they were losing the land war as well, the Japanese basically they only had one objective. They needed to control the seaways so they could get their troops onto the mainland to continue fighting the Russians, and the Russians were using the Trans-Siberian Railway to move their troops, but it wasn't really fully designed at the time, so it took far too long. So the Russians, on paper, they were going to lose this unless it went on longer and longer, and by then the Japanese would win at Mukden and other places, so it kind of didn't matter. But on the sea, the Russians decided they were going to send everything that was available, basically in the Baltic and the Black
Baltic
Sea,
and Black Seas.
and they sent it across the entire goddamn world at a
As you can
time
see.
when, yeah, you can look at this map. It's an incredible journey, and this is in a time, it's the age of coal and steam and all that. So you need coaling stations to be able to move these ships, but Russia did not have basically any coaling
This is
stations
actually
globally.
Britain's greatest asset, I might add,
Yeah.
for the Royal Navy at this time. They had so many strategically positioned ports around the world that a Royal Navy vessel would always be sailing at optimal capacity. So I think for the audience's benefit, I'll just say this. When they were provisioning the fleet and getting it ready, they stacked up on so much bloody coal, it was everywhere, that they literally could not even operate combat drills while on.
Yeah, I'll get into it. So the Russians had two quasi allies. The French were lukewarm to them because the French owed, like, basically the French loaned Russia an enormous sum of money that helped them develop their modern military at the time. So the French were like, we need them to win this war, so they'll pay us back. So the French were kind of open to the idea of letting them coal, but the French didn't have that many coaling stations, and it was technically illegal to let a non-neutral ship coal at your station. So the French were
I
kind of
think
like
there was a
hamstrung.
limit on number of ships that you would
Yeah.
be allowed, and that would have made the journey impossibly long.
So the French, they couldn't really do much to help them. Their other ally, who was getting them in the war in the first place, was Germany, was the Kaiser. But Germany didn't have any freaking coal stations anywhere, so they gave them what you call them in English, in French it's collier, the coaling ships. They gave them like a fleet of these ships to help coal up. But as for getting the coal, these ships would probably try to smuggle it out of neutral ports to get it to them because that bypasses the laws at the time. But this was not a good system. So
And they would be
it was
coaling
bad.
at sea.
Yeah. So if you're coaling at sea, the ships are full of this substance that's getting moved by the crews and all that. So the crews can't spend any time training for their gunnery, anything you can imagine. Oh, how long was this trip? Was it? It was less than a year, right? It had to be 1904 11. I'm trying to look at the map itself. How many months was this trip? Because they went across the entire globe. They had to meet up around Madagascar.
It's
The two
approximately, you
fleets,
could say, about 6 months from
6 months.
the first Black Sea detachment.
So why we're
Sorry,
bringing this
Baltic
up?
Sea.
Baltic Sea, yeah. So and there was a screw up. The two different the one that was coming out of the Black Sea was screwed over because of the Turkish Straits and all that. The Ottoman Empire wasn't friendly with them, so they made it really difficult for them to get out. So they were delayed back and forth. They finally meet up around Madagascar, but the entire time that they're going across the world in this miserable conditions, the Japanese the Navy had nothing to do. So the entire time the Japanese Navy spent at sea just training and basically undergoing some technological developments at the same time. Some new technology had come out right at this time that they got to practice. So they maximized their capabilities with their gunnery.
And
They
also, I think
were
the use of fire control and radios as well, right? Like they hone
yeah.
their
So
skills to be far better.
the fire control system was brand new for both sides, but the Japanese actually got to train on it for like 6 months for free because they were out at sea the entire time training. And the radio systems were new, and the Japanese had domestically built their own, so that was good because the Russians were using some German ones that they didn't understand, which would screw them over.
Not to mention let's just talk about the crew quality. It was actually like the first Pacific Fleet. You could say had the cream of the crop of the Russian Navy, not only in ships, well, most of the good ships at least. There were some pretty decent battleships with the Second Pacific Squadron, but in terms of crews and admirals, you mostly had the great guys only in the First Pacific Fleet.
Yeah, and I
I
mean,
think
there's numerous
some
problems
officer
between the
did.
fleets.
Yeah, one Russian officer said half of the guys on this fleet have never even seen the sea and don't know anything, and the
Yeah,
other
well,
half are so bad they just have to be taught everything again.
so the problem was the guys that were coming from the Black Sea, they couldn't be out at sea for like half the year. So they had half the training of the Russian system, which
You
wasn't
mean the
good.
Baltic Sea, I think, right?
Uh,
Because it gets
oh,
frozen
the
over.
Baltic Sea. Sorry, yeah, the Baltic Sea. And of the training that they had, they also had an issue where because they were going across the globe, they couldn't expend the ammunition they were bringing to battle, so they couldn't really do gunnery training properly. They weren't shooting, live rounds or anything. It was a terrible system. I don't know why they thought that they could come around the world and somehow defeat the Japanese, who
And
had just defeated
this
them.
is the greatest ship of that fleet,
Oh, which ship
the
is that?
Kamchatka. The
Kamchatka.
Kamchatka.
Kamchatka, yeah, that's the one that really screwed things up for everybody. Of course,
This
there's
was
also the
actually
famous,
it's a repair ship, right? If I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
there's also the famous Dogger Bank incident that you
Oh,
love.
oh
You
God,
want
I
to talk
love
about
that.
that? So that's a
Yeah.
mini episode on their journey that happens right away. They almost end up going to war with Great Britain in their home fleet waters, basically.
One sec. I think I'll just get back to sharing the main map only. The I think we should just also talk a little bit is I think when the first Pacific Fleet departs, and so they've just kind of like around here, gone past the Nordic Isles when the Kamchatka says, "I am surrounded by Japanese destroyers, 360 degrees. I'm surrounded by eight." Sends the entire fleet into a frenzy. Then afterwards, I was like, guys, we have pretty clear waters. Then they ask the Kamchatka, where are you? They're like, oh, I just did aggressive maneuvering and, well, you know, they disappeared. So, yeah, they actually expected Japanese, warships that are in Japan
Torpedo
to
boats. They thought that the
start.
Japanese would send torpedo boats across the world to surprise attack them like they did at Port Arthur. And there was rumors that the Japanese had a submarine program and could operate submarines, which they did not have, but whatever.
One thing I'll just say before we get to the Dogger Bank, it's anyways kind of chronologically after this. Rozhivensky, the admiral commanding the fleet, he orders his ships to get into a tight formation, right? Like a typical sailing formation for a fleet. And he's like, nothing is going to go through us. And lo and behold, a Russian fishing ship appears and they start blasting it. And well, those fishermen successfully reach Rozhivensky's flagship and just give him the news he's promoted to vice admiral and leaves. But yeah, the Dogger Bank, it happened over here. So it's kind of like off the eastern coast of England because the great British fishing fleet was there, which to the Russians meant, well, Japanese battleships and everything, right? Probably the, I'm pretty sure some Russian sailor would have thought they had the predecessor of the Yamato.
Yeah. And so
And
yeah, they
you want to continue?
I was just gonna say they it's like you said, it's this one it's Kamchatka. This one ship freaks out basically out of this entire fleet and sends these inappropriate messages that they're being surrounded. Then they send messages that there are torpedoes being launched at them. It's like
And
whatever.
then they're also being boarded.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the same. I don't know if it was Kamchatka that said this or if it was another ship. But one ship said that they believed they were about to be boarded. It's just
Yeah, it
hilarious.
was. I'm not sure if it's a Kamchatka, but the torpedo boat sighting and all, that's definitely on them. And in the Dogger Bank incident, yeah, the Russians, they blow up a lot of sardines probably. I guess the gunnery was pretty bad, but
They
yeah,
shot
they
the
did.
ships too. There's
Yeah, I think they
multiple.
did more damage to themselves than the British trawlers.
Yeah, some I forget the name of which cruiser. A cruiser shot a battleship in line.
I think if I remember correctly, the second battle squadron, I think it's the Oriole, I think, that got shot by the, what do you call? One second, just double checking that.
It's one of the greatest
Yeah.
incidents of friendly fire in history.
Yes. I just found it. So two of the cruisers, right? The Aurora and Dmitry Dronowski were taken for Japanese battleships and bombarded by the seven battleships.
Jesus Christ.
And
Yeah.
both ships were damaged, and a chaplain and one sailor were injured.
Yeah.
And as you said, right, several ships signaled torpedoes that hit them, not launched, hit them.
Hit them.
And
I
on
mean,
board the battleship Borodino, so the battleship is being boarded. So apparently some crews were like, wearing the life vests and lying down on the deck. Others were just like running around like Jack Sparrow with cutlasses.
so and let's not forget that the fishing trawlers that were just there, they saw these big ass ships, and when the ships put their spotlights on them, they literally raised fish to show them that they were fishermen as they begin to get fired upon.
I just don't
This
even
is
understand,
crazy.
like, trawlers are big. They're going to be like so low in the water. Not even
Yeah.
torpedo boats and destroyers are that low. And uh, another thing was the horrible accuracy. You were alluding to that they could not carry too much ammunition.
Yeah, and they expanded quite a bit.
Yeah, the battleship Oriole fired 500 shells from her main guns
That can't be true. There's
and
no
hit
way.
and hit and hit absolutely nothing.
You couldn't. There's no way 500 shells. But like, I know this battle went on for like what, intermittently 30 minutes at a
But
time
I
per
think it's
ship. I
gonna
guess.
be all the caliber since we did not have the Dreadnought class ships yet.
Yeah,
Like Dreadnought
yeah.
was no
Secondaries would
doubt,
be there.
yeah. Dreadnought was the first pure big gun ship. Otherwise, all the battleships were Britain, France, Russia, Japan. You had a mixture of maybe like four 10 to 12-inch guns, followed by an assortment of 8, 6, 5, 3-inch guns as well. It's probably a mix of all of that, but still, 500 ships and with an incident of so much friendly fire, you don't even hit your own self. But yeah, the British press were pretty pissed off, and the Royal Navy literally was told to weigh anchor, and the home fleet's 28 battleships was getting ready to set sail from Scapa Flow. And within like a few hours after the trawlers returned, the Second Pacific Squadron is being shadowed by British cruisers. Like Russia, you really were taking off the worst possible navy at this time, and well, one of the an admiral of the British fleet, he was actually just saying that he made a study. He's like, "Oh yeah, I think we just need to send in about 4 ships, and I think we'll easily win. Rest of my fleet can just watch." And I
Yeah.
think someone in the Admiralty, it was just suggested that the home fleet and the Mediterranean fleet, which can sally out from like Gibraltar and Malta, and just go and just crush the Russians in a pincer, and the Russians would be like outnumbered 4-1.
And needless
And
to say, the Dodger Bank incident, Britain pressed legal issues against the Russians while they were en route, which the Russians had to kind of formally apologize to. I think there was somewhere in Spain they docked to kind of go through the incident, and Britain did not declare war in the end. For the luckily
yeah,
for the
and I think
Russians.
Roger had actually used that opportunity to blame it on one captain of one ship who had been pretty critical about him. So he said, "Yeah, this guy's responsible. Just handle him," and he just dropped him off at Vigo because
Yeah,
that's where
he
they
got rid of them.
docked.
Yeah.
And that's where actually after Vigo, as the main fleet goes to Morocco, right, which is the next part of the journey. Let me just bring up the map, right? So they're here. They are going down to Morocco. It is there the Great Kamchatka decided to get lost for a few days. Comes back and says, "I engaged 3 warships of the Japanese and defeated them, firing 300 shells." Uh, the said battleships were basically a merchant ship, another trawler of Germany, and a schooner.
And then I guess we can't get
That
away
was a
without
pretty.
talking about the end result. I'll just briefly bring up something. For people who don't know, it's one of the big, it's beside the Battle of Trafalgar. It's a very legendary naval battle. When the Russians finally do arrive, after their crews have suffered for months at sea, not getting on land much, drinking themselves to death. Alcoholism was really bad amongst the sailors. There was attempts at mutiny, and they had no time to train. They end up trying to pass through the Tsushima Strait. The Japanese know that they're coming. They're well prepared. They completely catch them off guard, and they engage in what was a decisive naval battle. So you can see on this map where they were coming through, and I just have one other little picture. It's a pretty long battle, but the most famous thing that occurs is Admiral Togo is capable of crossing the Russian
Crossing of the.
T,
Yeah.
yeah, which
One thing I'll just say about Togo, if you don't mind, I just really like how he said the decisive battle that they craved and prepared for 10 years. It only was used for 10 minutes of decisive battle. I don't know, I just really like that.
for those who one sec, I can actually pull up yeah, this works. Just to explain to the audience, pretty simple. If you look at this little diagram, crossing of the T, ships at this time had forward guns, and they have most of their firepowers on their broadsides, so on the sides of the ship. So if you can present your ships in a line with all their broadsides facing an incoming line that can only shoot from the front, well, obviously you're overwhelming them with like a fire capacity 10-1 or something. So the
At least
Japanese
better than
managed to.
I would just say better than the Nelson's time at Trafalgar because they don't really have much. Because at least you still have 2 forward
Yeah.
guns.
So the Japanese managed to cross the T, and they just absolutely destroyed the Russians. But it really, what it came down to in the battle was superior technology and superior training. Japanese just overwhelmed them with that, and they outgunned them. And then they destroyed what was the surviving remnants of like the entire Russian navy. The
Yeah,
Russians
I think
would
Japan
never,
just
yeah.
destroyed the Russian Navy, right? Completely.
Uh,
I mean, practically
the
and all.
the Russians still had some warships, around the globe, but
Ancient.
yeah, no. It was over. It was a crippling blow to a nation who had already borrowed like 100 years worth of loans from France to develop their military, and it contributed directly into the first revolution for the Russians in 1905, nearly toppling them. The Tsar managed to screw that up by pushing it aside, and then it'll bite him in the ass right at the end half of World War One when the revolution succeeds finally. But yeah, Tsushima.
Maybe you want to go to the Ottomans that you were discussing them.
Okay. So I was saying to Garv, for those who don't know, I work for Kings and Generals. I write a bunch of their series. For some reason, a lot of what I'm writing is behind their paywalls. So unfortunately, I don't think many people here might have seen them. I write their Russian Civil War series. I write their Ottomans during World War One series and the Italian campaign of World War Two. All three of these series are actually close to being done. The only one left is the Ottomans. I still have a few more episodes. But so I'm writing the Ottoman series currently. I'm just finishing up 1917 because I'm doing it chronologically. Here, I can bring up a map. There are no good maps of the Middle East during World War One because it's such a goddamn cluster. It's a clusterfuck. But if you can look here, this is kind of a before and after partition of some of the areas. It's not a great map by any means. But to sum up, the Ottomans come into World War One with two large objectives. One is to attack the Suez Canal because they believe they'll be able to cut off Britain's, means of communication between their Anzac forces and their supplies, because obviously the Suez Canal is crucial to the war effort for them. And that would greatly aid Germany. And then Germany could maybe win the war, and then everybody's happy for the Central Powers. The other thing that they're trying to do is reclaim territory that they had lost to the Russian Empire before the war, and that's
That
mostly
will
fought
mean
in the
in the
Caucasus.
Caucasus and all of that.
There's a little bit in Persia too, but it's 90% in the Caucasus. So the very beginning of the war for the Ottomans, they fight this battle. It's called the Battle of Saramish, and it is an unmitigated disaster that cripples them for the entire war. They never come back from it. Basically, they go on an offensive against the Russians, who the Russians were preparing their own offensive. So they're taken a little bit off guard when they're suddenly attacked by the Ottomans. They just put up defensive formations and they just obliterate the Ottoman Third Army. Never really recovers from this. And then for the entire rest of the war, the Russians just win every engagement basically against the Ottomans, the Caucasus, and they take what you can call as Eastern Anatolia, modern day Armenia, parts of what we call Kurdistan and stuff. They just eat it up. And then the Russian Revolution happens, and the Russians they have to leave the war. So they have to form an agreement with the Ottomans. They give them back a bit of the territory that they had taken, and they call it a day. The Ottomans get super lucky with the Russian Revolution screwing that up, because otherwise it looked like the Russians were literally pressing into interior Anatolia, and they probably would have threatened Istanbul at some point. Other than that, the Russians completely destroy Ottoman forces inside Persia, which is more of a war of mobility. It's a lot smaller scale, but the Ottomans they incapable of doing anything in Persia. The British thwart two large attempts by the Ottomans to attack the Suez Canal. One is very early into the war. The other one's around 1916. And that army that's led by von Kresstein is obliterated. There's not much they can do. One thing that the Ottomans ended up having as a major victory is, of course, what a lot of people are aware of, is the Battle of Gallipoli. This was a disastrous attempt by the British and French to force a crossing through the straits to try and directly threat Istanbul. The Ottomans were able to defend the Gallipoli territory on land. Embarrassing, the Entente. It really turned things around for them for morale. But the British, on the other side, would take Baghdad. And that was, as I'm writing this, I'm finishing up 1917. By the end of 1917, the Baghdad, Mecca, and Jerusalem are taken. Three of the most symbolic great cities, for the religion and that. So it's bad for the Ottomans. It looks awful.
I think in the 1500s, literally the Ottomans conquered that started conquering that region to say they are the champions of Islam, right?
Yeah.
So it's a big blow.
I'll call it you can call it I called it the Jerusalem campaign. That's not appropriate. It's not what it was called. But anyways, the British, after the Suez Canal attack, the second one goes so poorly, the Ottomans are pushed back so far across the Sinai, which is, you can think of it as the territory between Egypt and Jerusalem. I mean, it's not that large, but anyways, they push the Ottomans back so far that they decide that they're just going to attack modern day Palestine, basically. And it's the Palestine campaign, or the Southern Palestine campaign, and they start taking over. And this is actually goes into the formation of Israel. The British, after winning their great victory in Jerusalem, they declare that they're going to create a
I think that's what.
homeland.
And then also you had the Sykes-Picot Agreement as well, and all of that, right? Because Britain were like, they wanted the support of both factions, like between the Arabs and the is Jewish people. So they made promises to both.
Hey guys, this is Craig from the Pacific War Channel. Please don't forget to check out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account over at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel, where you can join the ranks and gain access to a hell of a lot of goodies. At the base minimum, you get access to the exclusive monthly podcast, early access to all of my content, voting rights for what subjects I will tackle next, and at higher tiers, I have much more goodies to come. So please click that link and check it out. But if you're looking at the map right now, look at what is encompassing the Ottoman Empire. Everybody surrounding them is going to war with them. What we call Arabia or Saudi Arabia today, there's major revolts by the Hashemites. So actually, the current royal family there, it's called the Arab Revolt in English. They're working with the British. Famous Lawrence of Arabia is part of that.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Although Lawrence of Arabia is actually he's full of shit. He was part of a large team of people who all did like the equal amount of work. Yet I guess he wrote the best because he stole a lot of the glory. It's surprising. This guy got away with murder in a lot of ways because he makes it sound like he was the single guy who did the diplomacy and got all the deal. It's not true. He befriended one of the leaders amongst the royal family, which was a guy called Fazl.
That's probably the one reason he decided to say, "I'm better off."
But militarily, I mean, Ottoman defectors were working with the Arabs to do this that were more important. Anyways, it's there's a whole thing about Lawrence of Arabia. He gets a little bit too much credit.
It's also crazy, right? Because you're still going to be commanding forces of at least a few thousand men, and he's still a captain.
Yeah. I mean, he did blow up some of the Hijaz Railway. It wasn't technically his job to do so, but he got involved with it. He did courageous things. He fought in some of the battles, and he helped direct them. So one of the key things he did is they wanted the Sinai campaign. So after the Suez battle was going so well, the British who were coming from Egypt were like, wow, we could actually probably find a line of communication between us and the Arab Revolt. So the Arab Revolt took it's called Al-Aqaba. It's a port on the Red Sea. And the British were coming up to take Jerusalem, and they formed a decent supply line because the British didn't want to have soldiers in the Arab Revolt because of the religious issue. They didn't think they would work well. They wanted the Arabs to fight for themselves, but they funded them with gold and weapons. And the French
So are you
provided
talking
some
about there's
Muslim
a
soldiers.
it would not be a new crusade?
Yeah, well, it was a bad look. The Arabs were fighting against fellow Islamic, like the Ottomans, right? So
I
it
know.
would not look good. So
True enough. Just
and on the other side, this was in response to the Ottomans issued a jihad. So the Ottoman jihad was supposed to rise every Islamist across the globe against the Entente powers. Literally, the Sultan was like, "But don't go against the Germans. Just everybody else. It's a jihad, but just not against the Germans."
no, it's just like the asterisk that says terms and conditions apply.
Yeah, one of the funniest things is they created a propaganda piece that said that Wilhelm he became Muslim and that he he was a friend to them, and it's all bullshit, right? That he had come, he went to Mecca, and he officially did everything. It's such a weird piece of propaganda, but yeah. So the jihad thing didn't work very
Actually,
well.
well, self-explanatory if the Arabs only are revolting against them.
And I mean, when you say Arabs, this is hundreds of different tribes, and they're all fighting for different reasons. You also have you have the Kurds, you have the Armenians, you have a bunch of Greeks. There's a lot of different groups that are fighting for their own independence movements. It's a
It's
mess. Yeah.
Yeah, we also should, because it's broadly near the same theater. The Balkans did like beyond Austria and Serbia. they did have a pretty decent amount of fighting between, like, Moldova, Bulgaria, Romania, Greece. Those guys did get involved as well.
World War One, the Balkans is more pressing than in World War Two. I'd say it's a much hotter theater that goes very very long into it, and there's a lot
I
of
guess it's also
insurgencies.
maybe the prestige in a way because, see, ultimately the trigger points was from the Balkans. So Austria technically had to avenge them, and then it just kind of like spirals out.
It's funny that Austria-Hungary ends up allied to the Ottomans. If you think about it, it's kind of comical. the, the two
Yeah,
warring
considering they
empires,
what Austria and Ottomans, how long have they been fighting? 400 years.
at least, yeah.
Yeah,
And now they're best of
siege of
friends.
Vienna,
Siege of Vienna.
siege of
Yep.
Vienna's,
Yeah.
Vienna's twice. The Battle of Zenta, where Prince Eugene just crushed
Hmm.
the Ottomans.
Yeah.
Then the Austrian friendly fire incident.
And we make fun of Italy during World War II a lot. I would say the Ottomans during World War One are much more comical because I had to read an entire thing on the economy of the Ottoman Empire when it came to wartime production, and I'm not kidding. They had like a single munition factory. Like it's
Wait,
insane.
are you kidding me? Like, see, we know the Ottomans deployed hundreds of thousands of troops, literally.
Yeah, but they artillery they were relying on Krupp made weaponry from the Germans. So at the beginning of the war, they had their lines were completely cut because the Baghdad Berlin railway wasn't even complete, and obviously there was a war going on in the Balkans, so they couldn't get the supplies. They open it up with Gallipoli, and supplies gets in, and a lot of German advisors with gun crews for artillery are what helps the Ottomans win minor battles. Even in Gallipoli, the Germans did an enormous amount. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to tip the scales. Like we see with the two battles for the Suez Canal, von Kronstein is not able to do anything. And then it's under his leadership, and I forget the name of another German commander, because the Ottomans, for some of their armies, they don't even actually command it themselves. They give the command to the Germans. And during the Southern Palestinian campaign, the German commander, because it's von Kronstein and another guy, they lose and then they get sacked, and it gets much worse for the Ottomans after that. They don't win any real engagements other than Gallipoli and I mean, I guess you could say they won with the Armenian genocide, but
Oh, God.
other than that, yeah, that very very real thing, despite what the current country of Turkey wants to say, because we
Yeah,
have the
I know.
meeting minutes. I mean, the three pashas talked about it, they gloated about it to their colleagues in
Well,
Germany, and the Germans
I'm
released those
wondering, are we
minutes.
going to get cancelled for this now?
I don't think my audience predominantly
Has
comes from
that
that
many
part of the world.
Turks?
Well,
Alright,
since we're
good.
on the same subject, I just want to say that Kurdistan should be formed, and it should encompass like a third of Turkey. See how they like that. Sorry, yeah, one of my best friends is a Kurdish national, so if I invited her on here, she would say a lot of shit.
Because you just mentioned Italy, I know we poke a lot of deserved fun at Italy's
Yeah, of
generals
course.
and capabilities of World War Two. In World War One, they had some pretty decent soldiers, at least equivalent to the conscripts of pretty much every other army, you could say. Just given to the level of what a conscript is expected. They just
Exactly.
had a piece of shit of a general, commander in chief, called Luigi Cardona, who was an absolute bastard. The way he just led the men.
Yeah,
He blames them for everything, doesn't give leave, etc. A lot of executions and all, and he also, for some reason, talks high and mighty as if he's better than the British and French generals. That literally after you know the and Austrian offenses in 1917, British have said, "Okay, Italy, if you want us to send in like 10 divisions of soldiers plus a lot of artillery and supplies, here's the condition: sack Cardona." That's literally it.
yeah. And since it's kind of on the same scale, because I'm also finishing up the Russian Civil War. So I'm also, I mean, that series not as chronological done. It's more I do it region by region because I don't know how you would do it chronologically. So this is just a map that's not even in English, mind you, of what I was covering 2 weeks ago. So it's the spring offensive of Admiral Kolchak. And you heard that right. A admiral was leading the land forces for the White
Actually, it's
Russians in the
not.
east.
It's actually not unheard of because during
No,
Napoleon's retreat, one of the Russian armies was actually commanded by Admiral Chichagov. I think at one point he had, I think, 60,000 soldiers under his command, moving on to the southern flank of Napoleon's retreat. So, yeah, it's not unheard of for a Russian admiral to command a land army of 50, 60,000 men.
yeah, it's honestly it's impossible to describe. The Russian Civil War is an enormous sum of, I'll call it, regional campaigns that eventually see concentrations of what we call white Russian forces. So forces that are for various reasons fighting against the Bolsheviks, the Reds. It could be to reform the Tsardom. It could be to form a different form of government, to just be a dictatorship. You don't know. And of all, there's a major groups. Deninkin is a guy who springs up in, we'll call it, the South. There's a guy that springs up in the North who's attached to the Finns.
He was the
The
guy who would be leading the Whites, right? This admiral, like the White
Yeah,
Russians.
yeah. Well, Kolchak was a admiral who wasn't even in Russia during the revolution, and he comes back because he was doing some naval stuff. I think he's in Vladivostok or something. He uses the Trans-Siberian. He gets over, and he comes at a time when everything's all over the place, and he just says, "Hey, I have the means and the ability to lead forces. So blah blah blah. Let's make me the supreme commander." The other big commanders who are fighting their own campaigns, like Denikin in the south, he agrees because they kind of justify each other's existence. The northern commander, forget the name of him. He doesn't like Kolchak, but he agrees too. And they don't. They're trying to coordinate, basically, we'll call it a giant envelopment in the direction of, let's say, places like Moscow.
Mhm.
It absolutely could have won. It could have worked. If you're looking at this map, this is Kolchak is fighting from the east, so he's fighting from the far east in
So
Siberia.
you could say like his starting line, if you go by this map, is like at the just at the west of the Ural Mountains, moving towards
Yeah,
Moscow.
his power base is behind the Ural Mountains, and this is World War One time period, not two. So the factories don't exist. Like it's not the robust, producer of munitions or anything like it'll be in the future. Kolchak has an enormous amount of people. He has support from the Entente, but they're at this point kind of looking at things and not trusting any of the Russian commanders, and they can't
But
really give him men or anything.
where do you? I just have to ask this. Where was Brusilov at this time? Like, where was Brusilov? Was he fighting for the Russian government, Reds, etc.? Because I
I'm
know
not sure.
ultimately he did. He remained in relatively good grace by with the communist regime when they took over. Brusilov.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You have to look it up. I'm not sure
All
because
right.
some of these commanders they go white and then they turn back red. I don't know myself.
So they're just mercenaries.
Yeah, because I'm not an expert on the Russian Civil War.
Fair
I
enough.
did not want to write this series. They kind of forced it on me. But Kolchak, he does what is called the spring offensive. So it's like, as you can see on this map, he's coming from the east and he's just driving towards Moscow. But his idea is to try and link up with Denikhin or the northern forces, and his forces, we'll call it, make contact with both of those sides. But this contact isn't realistic. It's like 500 kilometers. It's too far for them to realistically support each other's campaigns or share any lines of communication, any supplies or anything. So saying that they contacted each other, it doesn't mean anything. It's too large of an area that they're fighting.
You
And
mean just maybe a soldier just coming up and said, "Hi, I'm from Kolchak's forces. Nice to meet
yeah,
you."
it was just cavalry scouts basically that went over, and they're like, yeah. So they're telling him, hey, Kolchak, we're at this place right now. This is how far we are. Communication is terrible in the landmass. They don't have like modern technology to like even say where they are. And his offensive eventually it bogs down, and the Red Army braces itself. The Red Army got this shit kicked out of it. They were terrified. Trotsky freaked out. Stalin was freaking
This
out.
was in 1917 after the fall of the Tsarist
Yeah,
regime, right?
yeah. So spring 1917, the Reds, they get hit really bad. One of their armies, it's the Fifth Red Army, is like almost annihilated, and they simply they produce some victories in other theaters. They take some reserves, they push it east, and then they just destroy Kolchak's forces. They push him into the far east to places like Chitka and all that, and he's never able to come back from this. It's the last breath of the White Revolution too. After this, it's nothing.
Yeah, but I think after that, the Central Powers put a massive, horrible indemnity and treaty on the Bolsheviks, which was a pretty crippling treaty to say the least.
It's actually directly at this time. So the Brest-Litovsk treaty that you're talking about, in
Yeah.
the negotiation period, the Central Powers just attack them to like strong arm them so that they have to sign it, because it's an on and off thing. And there's different versions of that treaty. Like, for example, the Transcaucasian territories form their own version of it. It gets signed, and then the Central Powers start attacking.
The only when nobody said there were like several versions of this, I was just thinking about my work documents where I'll say like file V1, V1.1, 1.2,
Oh my
1.3.
god,
I'm
there's
just
many for this one. And yeah, like you said, it's crippling for the Soviet Union. It's an embarrassing treaty that they are forced to sign for a number of reasons, other than the fact that they can't possibly win against the Central Powers. They had trouble attacking Poland, so it ain't gonna go well for them.
yeah, and I
Not
think if I'm not mistaken, by the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, they lost like what 70 to 75% of all railways and industrial capacity or something like
yeah.
that, and a
The
good chunk of the
territory.
population.
Oh yeah, the population is one thing. I mean, even in Siberia, there is a large population, but the
But
industrial
it's
base is gone. It's all taken.
yeah, because well, what industry do you need in Siberia?
Exactly.
Ice skiing.
So Kolchak, I like to think of his spring offensive as the last real attempt to finally defeat the Reds, because the problem with when you're talking about the Russian Civil War, everybody is fighting. And there's not just whites and reds. There's these greens, they're called. They're like regional. They're termed green because they're fighting for their own region. In Ukraine, for example, there's a lot of green forces. There's
I was just thinking of green
anarchists,
parties, green
green
political
parties.
parties. Not to
There's
mention, in the Russian Civil War, you can say that the Germans and Western allies also got their hands involved. Like Harald
early on.
Alexander actually was leading a contingent of German soldiers.
Yeah, Estonia there was being defended almost 90% by Germans. Latvia, Lithuania, German forces are there. The Finns fight their little war for independence.
I think didn't the
Everyone is pretty
Czechs
successful.
didn't I think a group of Czech soldiers I think took
Yeah,
Vladivostok
the
and
Czech
everything.
Legion. So
Yeah, the Czech Legion. Thank you.
that's actually what formed Kolchak's early power, was the infamous Czechoslovakian Legion. It was like 50,000 guys that were trained. They were en route when all of a sudden the revolution hit, and they just happened to be stuck. So the the Bolsheviks were like, you know what? We're going to let you use the Trans-Siberian Railway to go across the country free of charge, whatever. Just get out of here and everything will be good. Doesn't work that way. There's regional conflicts. The Czechs all of a sudden start attacking and seizing major towns on the route of the Trans-Siberian Railway. So they just conquer as they go along because of various reasons. It honestly, they destroy the shit out of the Bolsheviks, and the whites basically surround themselves with the Czechs, because the Czechs have proper weaponry, proper training. They become part of the white forces on paper. But when Kolchak is doing his spring offensive, at this point, the Czechs were like so fed up with the situation that they just left. And with them leaving, a lot of the power was gone for the whites.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the
That would
Entente
have
couldn't
been,
do much either. The Entente had sent forces in Murmansk and Arkhangelsk, as well as near Denikin in the Crimea. But other than that,
yeah, I think for the Central Powers they wanted the ports, obviously, and the breadbasket, which was supposed to be Ukraine, even though Germany never really learned how to optimize agriculture, it seems, between the
no. And
wars.
Ukraine is one of the sad stories, because of all the independence movements, the Ukrainians had too many enemies. They fought against the Bolsheviks internally, then against external Red armies, and then they got into fights with their neighbors, like the Poles. And I always forget the name of the country, doesn't exist. Galicia, the
Galicians.
Galicians. Yeah, they fought them. They formed an alliance, and even with the Poles at one point, but then the Poles betrayed. It's a whole thing. So the Ukrainians end up losing, and they
Yeah, I
become
think it's a
the.
long history also if we date them back to the Kievan Rus.
It's yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Real country, despite what Putin thinks, with a real history. But they
Apparently,
just
no.
Putin, he has all these infamous, these great memories of what the Soviet Union was. And last time I recall, the Ukrainians were part of a Soviet Union, and they had fought it, until they were forced into a collective with it. So I think that's a real country with history, but whatever. Yeah, brutal for the Ukrainians. The other country, Georgia, of course, gets forced into it. They didn't put out much of a fight, mind you. There's a lot of smaller nations that eventually get incorporated into the Soviet Union, but a lot of nations won. I mean, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Finland, they fought very well
I mean,
with a lot of German
Finland,
support.
but even in the Winter War of during World War II,
Yeah,
yeah, sure, Finland was occupied by the Russians for a
yeah,
bit,
but
but the toll that was extracted was, I mean,
intense.
Finnish soldiers are suffering PTSD from killing too many Russians.
Yeah, I mean they
But
did
then
they
again,
did
the
an
Russian
amazing job
generalship
fighting.
at the start of World War II was just ski soldiers that actually work. That is actually
Anyways,
one
that
of the things
covers
too.
two major series I'm writing.
Yeah, but actually, because just decided to talk about the Finns and the skis, right? That is actually one entire Alpine and Mountain Brigade and another brigade from the British was supposed to be going to Narvik and all during World War II to hold it. But then that expedition actually never takes place because when it just before they set sail, like you literally have that brigade practicing skiing in the Swiss Alps.
Yeah, I mean the Norwegian campaign of World War II is a fantastic. The Germans really pulled the rug on the Allies. Just absolutely ridiculous what they did to them, causing
Yeah.
the freaking Allies to put so much resources and men into Norway just to all of a sudden attack France the way that they did, and then force them to have to move all of that out. Such a dumb blunder on the Allies' part.
Well, I mean, but Allied leadership also at the start of the war was it also that great?
Certainly not.
Yeah. Like, but do you know one of the reasons I found out why France was so like their generals were just so pessimistic and everything in World War II? Their age. Do you know
Yeah,
what
it's
is
true.
the
They were
average age of British and German major generals or divisional commanders?
in World War Two,
World War II.
1940.
Yeah.
65, 70.
No. The major generals, right? So at least divisional commanders, they would be in the mid 40s.
The divisional commanders. Yeah, sorry, I thought it was
Yeah.
like talking about like the.
No, but and even the top commanders, right? Like guys who would be like, say, Tiny Ironside, and then technically speaking, Franz Halder.
Mhm.
But these guys were still like in the mid 50s or late 50s. France's youngest divisional general at the outbreak of war was, I think, 61.
Holy shit! Yeah,
Maurice Gamelin was 67.
Petain.
Doesn't believe in telephones.
Well, how old was Petain? He was like 80 something, like that old piece of shit.
Though apparently the guy was so energetic when he was given command of France before the Petain regime took over. Apparently, it's like someone was describing that the guy was willing to rush down three flights of three steps at a time and everything. Or like though I don't think he really liked Renault,
Yeah.
and apparently also he did not like Renault's wife. I think
Well, I
Renault
mean,
lost a lot of credibility is because I think some officers came to Charles de Gaulle and suggested the union of Britain and France, and the French absolutely despised that idea.
no shit.
Well, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was like the British accepted it if they thought they can legally keep France fighting.
I mean,
But
during that time, yeah, maybe.
yeah, but anyways, then what's your option, right? You have Petain, you have Paul Reynaud, or you have Charles de Gaulle. Doesn't really sound like a choice to me. I mean, I'd probably take Darlan, probably, if I had a choice.
He was the one who played ball a little bit.
At least he seemed to have a rational head. Definitely not Henry Giraud, because my honor demands I command every American, British, Anzac, and French soldier in the Mediterranean theater because I
Well, it
commanded
is.
an army that got its ass kicked in 1940.
Seriously.
That was the most odd. Even it was like Eisenhower and Clark were like, "What the hell is this guy on?"
And they're like, yeah, we don't need you, really. We're just going to go with Darlan.
Yeah, and Jiro then at least said, "Okay, fine," because he was shipped over in HMS Seraph, which is British crewed, speaking American
Trying
with
to.
American accents,
Did not fool the
right?
French at all.
No, I did not, but I think it was enough to fool Jiro to come over at least to Malta to discuss with Ike and Clark.
It's funny, he just did this, and then when they're like, okay, could you still, on the radio tell them to stop fighting us and stuff? He's like, well, I guess I'll do that much.
I think ultimately he became like second in command of the Free French under de Gaulle, even though he disliked de Gaulle.
Yeah, they really hate
Well,
each
I mean,
other.
yeah, to be fair, well, how many people actually even like de Gaulle?
Well, you have to remember, the goal was draconian against the people who didn't like fight at the beginning. He didn't like the turncoats at all.
Yeah,
Understandable, but
the actually some of the French resistance members, right, when they decided to start uniting in their movements, because you could say de Gaulle was kind of onto the right of the political spectrum.
mhm.
A lot of the left, you could say left leaning resistance leaders, they still rallied to him because they realized that, okay, at least they were pragmatic enough, these guys, that we do need a central figure to rally around to make our resistance way more effective. So I think that was pretty pragmatic on their point, and really without de Gaulle, considering he was the only, you could say, senior officer of France at that time openly opposed to the Nazi regime. So
Yeah.
it made sense. The resistance kind of had a very bad image of the British and Americans after D-Day. So
I mean,
after
there's
D-Day, right?
also there's
They
other
thought
grievances.
no, they thought that literally like, oh, they've landed. They're not just gonna expand across France. We're gonna see like by 10th June, paratroopers dropping like 200 miles inland to support us and everything. That was their expectation.
Yeah.
And when it did
Okay.
not, and when it did not happen, they're like, ah, shit. That's your expectations for you.
Well, I always found the French, honestly, the amount of things that have been written about the great efforts of the French resistance. I'm like, I'm sorry, but they are the backseat of most. Like the Greeks resisted too. The Greeks were fighting as much as they were in the Italian campaign. Like the
The
French
Norwegian
really,
resistance.
yeah, the French love to boast about the war effort. I'm sorry, you succumbed to the enemy really early on, and then you aided the enemy pretty heavily, and you formed your own little regime to save yourself. So,
Actually, this is an interesting thing. We know Nazi Germany's tolerance, obviously, to the Jews and how they were being rounded up in first was only Germany proper.
yeah,
So it had not yet expanded into, say, like the directly occupied areas of Nazi Germany, the Third Reich. But Vichy France actually began rounding up the Jews uh, well before it was even being done by the Germans in the occupied
yep,
France.
yep,
People tend to forget that little detail. And sometimes I always wonder why the hell does France have a seat in the UNSC Permanent Council? Because if you take the consideration that the permanent members are like the victors of World War II, you could say, you can make a case of the four other members having made immense contributions to the war, right?
hmm
I actually used to doubt China, but then actually after studying a lot more, I just realized, Well, they may not have had the same level of technology success, but the manpower requirements, the fact that they tied down at any point 2/3 of the Japanese armed forces, that itself is quite a commitment. And then you have France.
I mean, I don't think France should have been given any like the what they achieve at the end of World War II is bullshit. And I mean, like, let's look at it this way: what do they do immediately at the end, half of World War II? They start trying to stab down their colonies in Southeast Asia, and they cause the Vietnam War. Like, they're a piece of shit. Fuck France, you
And
know?
like they just get a participation certificate.
Yeah, it's crazy. They come to the table. It's like, oh, we were here all along, and we deserve this quadrant of Germany, and we're gonna get this, and that's like, no, they should not have
Britain
been
and
participants.
US would be like, bro, what the hell are you smoking?
Well, Britain liked France because France had to listen to Britain, so it was like a poker chip in Britain's hand against the
Fair enough.
Americans at the table. That's why they kept them there, because they could wrestle some
That's
control
actually
from the Americans.
the this is actually do you know about Maurice Gamelin's famous promise to the Poles?
To the polls, no.
So I think by August 1939, everyone knew war is inevitable.
Hmm.
Countries had begun their general mobilization of all armies. Maurice Gamelin promised the Poles that within 2 weeks of Germany's attack on you, I will be launching a massive armed invasion across the Rhine with 60, 70 divisions, which,
Which
mind
should
you,
have.
for 100, the 100 division strong French army, it's a strong force on paper.
Hmm.
Do you know what is the ultimate attack?
It was pitiful.
Maybe a regiment for a little bit. They just crossed the Rhine, did some little damage, and just went back to France. And Maurice Gamelin's like, "Yes, I have repaid my debt and obligation to Poland."
It was such a honestly, France screwed up so much there, and I know there's a lot of unknowns, but I mean, all the pre-war plans. What happened? Why would you not be Why would you not be on the offensive? It's
They were,
insane.
I think, maybe it's also because they just did not understand weapons. So, like
Well, yeah, they were outdated.
When Churchill, no, not only that, when Churchill took over as First Lord of the Admiralty, when war came back and he came into the cabinet, one of the things he suggested was literally just taking ships and literally booby trapping the Rhine River.
Hmm. Yeah,
The French shot down that idea because they thought the German bomber fleets will come over and bomb the hell out of France. Because at that time, bombers, even though you still don't have like the heavy bomber fleets that would later devastate Japan and Germany, they thought bombers were like this Armageddon weapon.
yeah. I know because Kanji Ishiwata had wrote extensively on that as a subject. He thought that every major city in the world would be knocked out by just thousands of heavy bombers. That's how it was going to be in World War II.
But it did not really work, right? We saw like you could
Well, at
like
the
if you look at
end,
what
yeah.
could you say that? I don't think so. Look at Bomber Harris's raids for so long into the German cities. They
Only
really
the
did not
Americans
cripple
and Japan managed it, and it was over time. It wasn't instantaneous, and I mean, they
and
only had it's
losses were
America.
atrocious.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
not to
what
mention,
they
like at least for the British in Bomber Command, losses were pretty bad. I think 60 to 70% of crews never even completed their first tour
yeah.
of operations.
Well, I mean,
So
your
I think this is just
anti-aircraft
for
weaponry was impressive for that age. I
and
mean,
they
it
and
would be hard.
the Germans actually had pretty good night fighter capabilities developed by mid 1942. They had like radar guided Me 110s, and I think some of the greatest aces of night fighting had like 30 to 40 kills. One night fighter, though. I think it's like obviously as time went on, Germany's industrial capacity went down. Armies had been consecutively defeated. How long can you keep hiding that secret? I think they played a bigger role, and starvation as well, in
Hmm.
destroying civilian morale way more than Bomber Harris's raids ever did.
Yeah, in World War II, it came down to combined arms attritional warfare. It
Yeah,
wasn't what they
and
thought. Yeah,
Britain actually prepared for such a war right from the get go.
yeah. It's easier for Britain,
Britain,
though, mind you.
true, but Look at this: France, Germany, Russia mobilized literally hundreds of divisions. Britain literally took a decision that we're not going to increase the army. This is including Australian, at least some Australian divisions, because I think the forces fighting in the Pacific were exempt. With the Canadians and the British Indian Army, they're not going to have more than 55 field divisions.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Rest will be going into the Air Force, the Royal Navy, for the steel not flesh policy.
Yeah, I mean,
They wanted to keep.
for the Western Allies, steel instead of blood policy was in place, so it fit that.
Yeah, and unlike the Germans, they actually believed in standardization of equipment.
Yeah, that really. I mean, Germany had numerous issues with logistics. That's just one of many problems.
I know I've said this on one previous episode, but this happened literally at the declaration of war. One British guy, he was a little bit of a pro-Nazi guy, but he was arrested in Munich as like he was traveling there, right? He had no party affiliation or whatever. He was just traveling there because a lot of these students and all would be doing that. So he was arrested because now he's technically an enemy citizen to the German state. And I think about 1 week later, he's released. They drive so 3 security officers follow him in a car, and he's driven to the Swiss border in his car. And then they just give him the keys to his car, but take all his money and documents. That he obviously asked the question, like, why? Why you've taken my money, you've taken my documents, why are you not taking my car? One of the security officers said, "We don't have spares."
Okay, that's funny.
It's a big premonition.
Yeah, it is. I remember reading this in a book. Yeah, Beaver. I think it was one of Beaver's
same
books.
guy goes to the Swiss embassy, British embassy in Switzerland, gets verified, and the British ambassador's like, "Oh, yeah, unfortunately you got there. By the way, I got your call up papers. You have been summoned to go back and join your local regiment." And the guy just tosses him fuel coupons so he can literally just go back to Britain in his car without money.
Jeez. Well, I think you gotta go soon.
Yeah. But it was a good session. We should try to make this maybe like once in a quarter or once or 2 months kind of thing.
I think the next few times we'll come up with some general subject matters, and we'll try to fit a narrative. I think we did this in chronological order, by the way. Just somehow it ended up like that.
True, actually, that's true. But I think maybe next time we can just decide in advance on a theme.
Yeah.
And just keep the theme, but events we can just discuss on the fly.
Yeah, and please, for the audience, in the comments, whether it's on YouTube or you can comment on Spotify, just let us know what you want to hear more from, specifically on these episodes. I know from the Clips channel, there's two major subjects that people are interested in, because I have 2 videos going viral over there. It was the theoretical invasion of Canada by the United States in the 30s, and Numenor from Tolkien. Those 2 are big.
The Giga Chads.
Yeah. So if you want to hear more about that, by all means, I can definitely go into that. Before I let the audience go, please, if you aren't checking us out on YouTube, please do so. We have a lot of visual components to this. I want to make this more of a visual experience. And if you'd like to further support the channel, consider checking us out on the YouTube membership or the Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War channel. Joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series. It's like 30 episodes ongoing at this point, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. This has been Politically Incorrect History. Until next time.